mercy. There is so many things that I could say today, and so much more of this history that I could offer. But it may actually be more than we can manage. I really just wanted to give you an overview of where we are. And so what do we do? What do we do as God's people from here? I think that's the big question for us today. And the question that I'm questioning is, you know, we continue to grow and learn together. That's what I've continued to do. I've continued to read books. I continue to understand history. I continue to talk with my Black brothers and sisters about what it's like, because I do not understand. We repent. Wendy Hudson, when they did I'm gonna get my blinds here. It's gotten really sunny here. You can't see my face. Wendy Hudson said the first thing that we need to do in our place is repent, right? It's those of us who have, and there have been times when I have been ignorant, or there have been times when I've been outright racist as a white person. And that's probably every day, that I have to repent for the damage that I have done, or places where I have not seen. We seek to right the injustice in the places we see. That's part of my work now, as a fellow Christian, as a fellow human, is to seek to right that and to help us understand it and be in conversation about it. That's my role, is to help us be in conversation about it. And then we make our churches places of unity open to all persons. As hard as that may be, my journey has been that as I have conversations and tell people my story, that they have a story too. And it helps us as white people to recognize that while we might think that we're colorblind, it's very difficult to be white and not be colorblind. And while we should not live in shame as white people, I don't think that's where God would have us be. I do believe that as white people, that he wants us to pay attention and to learn from our story, and to be open to learn from our brothers and sisters of color, and to learn from their story. Because the most powerful stories that I have learned have been from my brothers and sisters of color who were at the Orangeburg massacre, who were in their dorm rooms scared to death. And these are people that I respect. Or from a brother who was at a car accident and everybody was talking to the white person who perpetrated the accident, but he couldn't speak. And when they started to get scared. The police started to get scared. And his wife had to tell him to back off, afraid that he was going to get arrested and he wasn't the cause of the accident. When I hear stories like this, what I realize more than anything, folks, is that he is calling us historically now to listen to the story of history and to listen to one another right now in real time of what it's like, so that in some way, some form, that we can go and use the gifts of one another and the history. Because in the history, this is the last thing I'm going to say, in the history, the slaves, regardless of the demoralizing place that they were in, regardless of of being in the fields every day, regardless of being pregnant and having a child in the field and then having to go right back into the field the next day, regardless of being raped or regardless of being beaten, they would find time and find hope in God. And so they would hide out when they couldn't worship. They would hide out in the bulrushes underneath, and they would worship in the ways that they knew, because their hope was in a God, not in humanity, but in a God who could love them and could give them power, and that could release them to full freedom. And we have the AME church that was formed because they had the tenacity to form and build their own churches. When we, as Methodists, against actually John Wesley's judgment, better judgment, would not allow them to be there. We had lay speakers who were Black, who were slaves, who actually went with Coke and some of the other early leaders of Methodism. And we had them in white churches in the peanut gallery because the slave owners wanted to keep eyes on them. But they believed in the word, and they believed in the hope of God. And that is why when I go to a Black church today, I am refreshed spiritually, because that there is that huge faith that God is going to bring you through. So I say that today as a white person, because I believe that we as white people need to be speaking up, because I think our Black brothers and sisters are tired of telling the story. And so that is why I've been asked today to tell the story. I hope it's helpful to those of you who are my colleagues. I hope that you hear that as an act of love for you and an act of love for everyone on this table. I hope that you hear it and experience this not as an indictment as much as the truth of the story historically for South Carolina. And then I hope that you hear it as somebody who cares for everybody on this table today, that we together can be the church and what God is calling us to be. So I appreciate you spending time with me in that. And I think, Reggie, I don't know if you want to take statements or anything from that. I think we've got a calendar to go through, but
right. We're going to move forward at this time. We certainly want to thank my colleague, the Reverend Cathy Joens from Connectional Ministries, a wonderful colleague she has been for me these last 5 years. And as my time on Connectional Ministries is winding up, I want to take this opportunity to say to Cathy, what a privilege and a great joy it has been to be your colleague in this work. And we look forward to working with you as we settle back in to the local church on the Hartsville District. So at this time, we'll move forward. The superintendent has asked me to facilitate this portion of our time. And so I think this is how we will proceed. The Reverend Deborah Patterson, I believe, is one of the persons who will give us just a snapshot, a story about her entry into a predominantly white Euro-American United Methodist Church. And so Deborah is serving as the very capable pastor down in Merrill's Inlet in a 3-point charge where they are working feverishly to learn how to be the church who is amalgamating themselves into 1 or 2 locations. And she's doing a very wonderful job in giving significant leadership. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Deborah. I do need to say that we are running just a bit behind. And so I'm going to ask that the three presenters will try to stay within 6 to 7 minutes. And then we will have at the very end some moments of redaction criticism, or not so much criticism, but redaction by our responders. And then we will continue to press our way. And following Reverend Patterson will be Reverend Cynthia Brown, who will talk to us about the inequities in education. And let me go ahead and introduce her now. She is the pastor of the Joseph B. Bethea Church. She is a retired elder from the African Methodist Episcopal Church and has given significant leadership to Joseph Bethea these last 2 or 3 years. She is now, I believe, heading back off into retirement, but that doesn't mean anything for someone who's been called. It's just a matter of waiting for the right phone call. She'll be right back pressed into service. She is serving on the Marion County School Board. She has just recently been appointed, I believe, to the trustees of the state and helping to manage the state board. And so Cynthia has been an educator. She's the daughter of one of the first African-American principals in Marion County, one of the first Black administrators, who happened to be my uncle. But we won't claim greatness just because he was my uncle, but we feel pretty good about him. Anyway, so she will be second in line, and then finally, the first African-American the first African-American sheriff to be elected in Dillon County will close us out and talk about the possible pitfalls of being first, and also sharing any insights he has about possible inequities in the criminal justice system. So at this time, Reverend Patterson, we're in your hands for the next 6 or 7 minutes, and then we'll flow right into the Reverend Cynthia Brown, and then flow right into the final person who I hope Tim will introduce, who is now the sitting sheriff of Dillon County. All right.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for the introduction. To all of you on the calendar, I bid you grace and peace. Thank you so much. I am sharing from an incident that happened to me probably 30 years ago. And I was living in another state, and I was attending church, and was excited about going to church. I was in school, and so real happy about everything. I had a friend in school who was one of my white classmates, and we became best friends, did everything together. So I invited him to my church. And the situation occurred when I invited him to church. My going to church by myself was okay, but when I invited him to go along, we experienced a lot of hatred at the church. We got pushback from the church. I really didn't, I expected it on the outside, but not in the church. The pastor went so far as to give us a scripture to tell us why a white person should not be associating with a Black person. And he said this from the pulpit. So needless to say, we stopped attending, found someplace else to go. Well, I was sharing with Cathy years later, fast forward, say 20 years later. Here I am, I'm married, I'm in another state, and I have my daughter, and I decided to attend church again, and I wanted to take my daughter with me. But I said, I'm not putting her through this. as a student, it's one thing for me to get it. I can handle it because I'll admit I was just as ugly as they were. But now I've grown some, and I don't want my daughter to have to deal with this. So I called the church. They had a sign up. I wanted to go. They had a speaker. I wanted to hear the speaker. And I called them and told them who I was. I gave my telephone number. And I said, if you don't want me to come, let me know. I won't come. Be upfront with me. And so I waited. That may have been on the weekend. I started getting calls all during the week. And one of the members finally told me that the pastor read my message during their service. And their response was overwhelming. We want you to come. We want you to be a part of our service. We don't want you to stay away with your daughter. So, you know, that was really, really different from the first incident. I must admit, I ended up not going, not because I didn't feel welcome. I felt like they would have welcomed me there. I just said, hey, I'm not going to go. But when you feel that kind of hatred in the church of God, you really wonder, do we really have God? I mean, you know, you begin to doubt, you know, who you are and where you are, and could this be the house of God? That's how I felt about it. Um, so I mean, it made a really big impact on my life. So much so until years later, you could see it was like PTSD, you know, you're still dealing with it. And I kind of backed away with my daughter. If I didn't have her, I'm sure I would have handled it differently. Um, so I appreciated what Cathy said, um, listening to our stories and understanding how we felt. Now I feel like I've heard that that church has repented. They've asked forgiveness. I have friends that have gone there. So they've grown, they've changed, and that's good to know. Um, thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you for sharing. We will have some time for questions for you in a little bit. Now we'll move on to the Reverend Cynthia Brown.
I want to take a few minutes to talk about a man named Joe Fagan. Joe Fagan is a prominent researcher, a graduate of Baylor, and he received his PhD from Harvard University. He wrote a book entitled Racism in America.
Cynthia, your picture is off. Yeah.
My speaker's on.
No, your picture is off with your camera. Turn your camera on if you can, please. There you go.
Can you see me now?
Yes, ma'am. Got you.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I want to talk briefly about a man named Joe Fagan, and then I'm going to give a personal experience from my own life that ties into his theory. He has written a book filled with research on racism in America. And his book is entitled Racist America, the Past, the Present, and Future Reparations. In his book, he says that as it relates to education, there is a system in place called standardized testing that was specifically designed to hold back Black students from excelling on the test. He points out that standardized tests are created by middle class and upper middle class white individuals. He's white himself, and he went on to prove this. He said the test questions on standardized tests are not designed for Black students who had not had the same resources as white students. That a Black student taking a standardized test and sees the word polo or toboggan, they have not had the experiences to even answer test questions in that category. And he is saying that we headed back to a new style of separate but equal. And he explains that with the private schools and different schools pulling monies out of public school education, that the public schools are suffering and they have to get more funds from the state in different areas. Now, as it relates to our state, I met with Secretary Marley Spearman when I served as president of the South Carolina Black Caucus of School Board Members about a test in our state called the Praxis. The Praxis is very discriminatory. There are 3 sections of the Praxis. South Carolina is one of few students that require that you pass all 3 sections. And one of the sections has absolutely nothing to do with an individual's major. A person majoring in history has no business being forced to take a section of the Praxis that deals totally with math. It's just awesome. It makes no sense. I met with the state senator about the same thing, and I've sent letters into the General Assembly. So I'm a big proponent that if you're going to require a teacher to pass the Praxis, then you should require the colleges and universities to teach a semester course in how to pass the test. Many students are opting out of teaching because they have to pay to take the test. Each time they fail it, they have to pay it again. And being college students, they don't have the kind of monies to do this. South Carolina State University is the only school I found in traveling with our HR personnel that requires their students to take a semester in the Praxis during their junior year. Every teacher in education, every student in education at South Carolina State is graduating from that university having already passed the Praxis. The second problem, high school guidance counselors are not telling juniors and seniors that if they pass the SAT at the high school level, they will be exempted from taking that part of the Praxis. So I'm still focusing on trying to get some changes in our state because we have too many Black students who get to their senior year, cannot pass this test, and they have to walk away. Now, let me give you a personal experience. I took the teacher's exam, national teacher's exam, which the Praxis has now replaced 3 times. I passed it the 3rd time. Each time I took that test, I knew I passed it. So I sat down and shared my frustrations with my younger sister. And she asked me a question, 2 questions. She said, Cynthia, when you arrive at the test site, where do you sit? And I thought that was a dumb question. I said, what do you mean when I sit? She says, how do you decide where you're going to sit down to take your test? I said, well, when I stand in the door, I scan the room, and I guess I just walk into the area where I see more Black teachers going to take the test. She said, that's problem number 1. She said, the next time you take the test, I want you to go sit in an all-white area. I said, what do you? She said, just try it. She said, now, when they ask for your race, what do you do? Well, I bubble in black. She said, the next time you go, don't bubble in anything. They'll still grade the test. I did what she said, and I passed the test in flying colors. Mm-hmm. And I was so shocked that I began to spread that, what she told me, with other young people taking the test. Not only is it set up to make Black people fail, but by asking us our race, she was convinced that when the computer hit the first B for Black, that people would begin to fail. And I was crushed. So standardized testing is systemic racism. And when I traveled to college campuses, I went to Allen University, I told the dean, send your students to the University of South Carolina to take this test. Don't let them take it on this campus. This campus is all Black. And she listened to me. And 2 years ago, she sent me a letter. She said, Reverend, thank you for sharing that. She said, I never would have believed it. So there is something in place to prevent young people from entering the teaching profession, and it just breaks my heart. We have got to become an organized body and contact state senators, not just one or two people. It's going to take more, an organized group, and let them know you need to eliminate. You got practice 1, practice 2, and practice 3. I think it's practice 2 that's stopping people from entering the teaching profession. But Molly Spearman did tell me there was an experiment being conducted at Francis Marion University. It started last year, and I got to keep up with that, where they were trying to help Black students on their campus get around that section. She looked me in the face and she said, Brown, some of these students have 4.0s, 3.5 average GPAs, can't pass that section of the text of the praxis. People, that's ridiculous. That's all I have to say.
Mhm.
Cynthia, thank you so very much for your leadership across the years in education, in the church, in the life of the church. And thank you for bringing some illumination to the intricacies of potential systemic racism as it relates to education. I'm now going to turn this into the hands of our district superintendent to introduce to us Sheriff Douglas Purnell, who I have already stated to you is the first African-American elected to serve as the Dillon County Sheriff. Superintendent, would you do the honors?
Yes, sir. I will say when we were discussing this program, one of the possible topics came up, and Dr. Lee, you may have been the one who said it, was that we read stories and hear stories about people who are the first person of color to be in a position or to achieve something, and it's always presented as something positive. And yet there is another side to being the first at times, so that it is not always a happy occasion. And so in our planning team, Reverend Anthony Alford works in the school system in Dillon County, and he suggested that we talk to Sheriff Purnell, who has been very diligent today in trying to get in on this call, and I appreciate his persistent efforts. He was telling me that he wasn't sure that the computer wanted to let him in unless he claimed to be a United Methodist, but I assured him that was not true. And so we are delighted to have you. Thank you so much, Sheriff. I know how busy you are. We all wish that many professions, including law enforcement, was not as busy as it is, but thank you for taking your time. And we are to look forward to hearing from you as you talk to us about what it's like to be the first African-American sheriff elected in Dillon County, which for those of us who grew up in South Carolina, that is something. So welcome. We're glad to have you.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, well, again, I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. And yes, I am the first Afro-American sheriff of Dillon County. Not only the first Afro-American sheriff of Dillon County, but the first Afro-American to be elected to a county-wide seat in Dillon County. And that is a compliment, a struggle as well. As I began my campaign in 2008, when I first ran for sheriff, I had to go on as a petition candidate. And at that time, most Afro-Americans, they used to vote on a straight ticket. And it was an uphill battle. And actually, I had to do that in 2012 as well to do a write-in candidate. And then in 2016, I ran in the Democratic primary and lost by 250 votes. That was an uphill battle. And now today, I ran in 2020 and I won by like 1,600 votes. But what I want to share with you all it has been a struggle. Getting people to believe in you, getting people to willing to take that chance to give an Afro-American an opportunity to show that they can do the job just as well as their counterparts. That really means a lot to me by having the people that's given me an opportunity to serve as state sheriff of Dillon County. I have 36 years of law enforcement experience. And out of those 36 years, I have been in the role as a former chief deputy. And now that I am the sheriff of Dillon County, I serve a lot of people. And I have a lot of people that I have to listen to. And I'm the type of individual who don't mind listening. We have an open door policy. I told the people when I ran for sheriff, it's the scales of justice. It does not matter what your race is. What matters is who's right and who's wrong. And so when they come into this office, we're going to only go by the law. If you're white and you're right, then we're on your side. If you're black and you're right, then we're on your side. That's the way I want this to be throughout my tenure here at the sheriff's office in Dillon. But I know this is about the struggle. And it has been a struggle. You know, anytime you run for an office and you don't make it, you know, it sort of lets you down, take some air out you. But it seemed like every time it come back around, time to run 4 years later, a little energy. I could get a little energy and just say, the people deserve better than what we're getting. And I feel that with my leadership and the people that I surround myself with, that we could do a better job than what was being done. So far, the citizens seems to be happy with what we're doing, but I know that can change at any time. But again, it's a struggle for any Afro-American in any position that they do. It just seems as if, as an Afro-American, you must do double what your counterparts has to do. I grew up here in Dillon County. I've been in Dillon County all my life. So I know just about all the people here in Dillon County. So that kind of helps me out a whole lot by being able to know the grandparents, great-grandparents, mothers and fathers of these kids that's here. But at the end of the day, we're still going to have crime. We're still going to have to enforce the law. So that's my goal. And I just hope and pray that, people will stand by us when we're right. And when we're wrong, we'll have to face that. And I'll be the first one to say, when we're wrong, we're wrong. I've told my officers, I'll stand with you 100% as long as you're right. I can't stand with you if you're wrong. I won't let you down, but I can't stand there with you knowing you did something wrong. We will have to put it out to the public what happened, and we'll deal with the problems as they come. But it's been a struggle. It's going to continue to be a struggle. It's going to take some time to get the people to believe in you. It's going to take time for your department to believe in what you want to accomplish for Dillon County. And not just only Dillon County, in the Fourth Circuit, which is Dillon, Marlboro, Chesterfield, and Darlington. All four of the sheriffs there for the first time in the history is Afro-American. And we're pledged to work together to try to help each other in any way we can, not just in Dillon, Marlboro, Chesterfield, and Darlington, but the surrounding area, Marion County, Florence County, whatever we can do to bridge this gap that we have. That's our job. And that's what we want to do for the citizens of each and every county and anyone who come through this county. Again, I just want to be able to share this with you. It's the scales of justice. It's not the scales of color. It's the scales of justice. And that's what I stand by. That's what I lay down each night, believing in, saying a prayer in the morning, in the evening, even at night, asking the Lord to protect each and every one of us from any harm or danger that may come our way. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to come on and just share a few words of my struggle through the years that I have came up and finally made it as the sheriff of Dillon County. Again, thank you.
Certainly, we want to thank all three of our panelists who have given us, out of the depths of their own souls this afternoon, a glimpse into what it is to live as an African American who is wide awake in this country, and particularly here in the Palmetto State. And so we have asked certain persons to serve. We have asked certain persons to serve as respondents, and we will have about, let's see, it is, we'll have about 14 or 15 minutes maximum for responses so that we can wrap up and be done by 6 o'clock. I want to take this opportunity to welcome to this panel the Reverend Laura Witt. Laura is a ordained elder in this annual conference. Mr. Michael Toms, who is the Marion District lay leader, and the Reverend Ann Colvan, who is an ordained elder in this conference and serving here in the bounds of the Marion District. And the Reverend Ross Chellis, also an ordained elder, former director, I believe, and facilitator, convener of the conference connectional ministries team, who's done a very fine job in that leadership role. And so these persons are now before us to, in some ways, either ask a question of one of the panelists or to simply make a statement regarding one of the presentations that we have just heard. And we asked again that you would try to keep your comments to 3 or 4 minutes maximum so that we might do, as Mr. Wesley say, do everything on time. Thank you so much. And so the floor is open. If someone has a comment or a question for any of those persons who have just presented, feel free to jump right in.
Go ahead, Ross.
Oh, are you sure? I don't know. You can go ahead.
I'm sure.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ross.
Well, all right. And I'm sorry, I don't have names in front of me, but to the individual who was speaking about the testing, that really grabbed my attention. I was curious to know, just for clarification, are you suggesting that that's like psychological, or that there's actually like an actual testing, different tests that are being given? Because that just really would further shape my understanding of how these standardized testing are indeed affecting our education system.
Ross, that's the Reverend Cynthia Brown.
Yes,
senior
Reverend
pastor
Brown, sorry,
Joseph
thank you.
The Faith Church. Reverend Brown, would you respond, please?
He's
Reverend,
muted.
You're
You have
muted.
to unmute, Cynthia. You're muted. Mhm. There you go.
I'm not saying that there is a different test given. No, it's the same test, but here's the situation. The system is set up that when the test is graded, it's being graded differently. All right. I'm also saying that the test questions that are devised for standardized tests is being devised by a board comprised of about 95% white, middle, upper class individuals who are not aware of Black culture and diversities. And so some of the test items would be impossible for a Black child coming out of a home who had not been exposed to computer, books, or all kind of things that the white counterpart student had in their homes. So you've got two groups going into a test, but you've got a group that lack resources. It's not that they're slow. It's not that they're inferior. They simply have not been prepared. For an example, when I went to Tennessee State University, I graduated in the top 10 of my class. When they put me in physics, and I made an A in physics, and after one day in the class, I went to the dean of academics. I said, get me out of that class. And she said, why? I said, because if you send me back, I'm going to blow this campus off the map. I said, what you're teaching over there, I never received in South Carolina. It's not that I'm slow, but you need to put me remediation. I asked for it. You give me 1/4 there, and then you put me back into physics. And she honored me. I went back. I started making A's. So when you say that, you try and make Black students look as if they're inferior, they're not inferior. They simply need to have the same tools to take a test. Am I making sense?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And what struck me, I think, what I find interesting about that, is my wife is an educator.
Okay.
And she left the classroom actually, and has recently gone back as an interim, as a interventionist.
Okay.
But when we were in Hampton County, she was in a Title I school, in a very marginalized community, and her experience coming from a school in Dorchester too, where she got her start, to a school in Hampton One, and the fact of the matter is, seeing her as an educator being able to acknowledge she was not prepared to be able to relate to her students in a way that so it kind of goes both ways. The individuals who were in those classrooms needed a teacher who had that background, who could actually communicate with them in a proper way. My wife was so taken aback by the stories that she was hearing on a daily basis that she was giving more attention to caring for their spiritual and emotional needs as to their actual educational needs, to the point where it took her to a place of burnout as well. And so I find that very interesting, that it could be something within the way that we have the testing and certification process, part of that process that is limiting a wider range of qualified candidates for our teaching. And we definitely are not in a place where we need to make it difficult for qualified people to become teachers.
No.
Rose, I'll give you an example. This is real. In the literary section of some of these standardized tests, they will give you a question like this. Who said this? There's a tide in the affairs of men that when taken at the flood leadeth on to victory. Who said it?
I don't know.
Right.
I've heard it, but I cannot tell you exactly.
That is a line from Shakespeare.
Okay.
Most of our students have not been exposed to Shakespeare. However, if you ask them about, like when I was coming along, A Raisin in the Sun, Richard Wright, we could tell you who that was. But those kinds of questions never appear in standardized tests because, as my colleague and my cousin said, it's written by white middle-class folk who don't even know who Richard Wright is. But because they know who Shakespeare is, and they know we don't know who Shakespeare is, you see where I'm going with this? It's not fair. It's not weighted correctly. There should be, if we're taking seriously that this is a melting pot country, then you would think that there would be questions on there that would cross the spectrum. If we're talking about poetry, if we're talking about drama, that it would cross the American spectrum, but it's one-sided on purpose. Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right, is there someone else who would like to respond to one of the other persons who have shared a story?
I was kind of on the,
Yes, I would.
Brother Toms, go ahead.
Go ahead, Laura.
go ahead, Reverend Thomas. It's okay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to comment on the education portion. When Reverend Brown was speaking on the praxis exam and the standardized testing, they may call it standardized, whereas we may be taking the same test across America for the praxis may be concerned, but the scores for the praxis are not the same that will certify a teacher in every state with the same grade. I served on the Marlboro County School Board for a term or two, and my wife at the time, she had taken the praxis years ago when she was taking it for administrative certification, and her sister teaches in Louisville, Kentucky, and in South Carolina, we actually require a higher score,
Yes.
even in teaching and even in passing administrative, than you do in Georgia or Kentucky and other states. So it makes you wonder sometime, we call it standardized, but it's not standard across America.
Gotcha.
To whereas in a teacher coming from out of town, we may have to use reciprocity, as that teacher has been teaching in another state for 3 or 4 years, and then they can come over and teach in South Carolina, even with a lower score than a teacher in South Carolina will have to make in order to even qualify to teach.
Exactly.
So I just want to throw that out there.
And that's true. That's true.
That's good. Good. Laura, you want to jump in?
I do want to jump in.
Go ahead.
On the education piece, I also want to say that this lack of diversity, and I'm from a background of the mountains of Western North Carolina. So with education, I grew up without any real diversity in my classes. It wasn't until seminary that I experienced diversity in my classes. And I think that kind of lack of diversity leads to a problem for all of us, because I learned there were a lot of things that I had never heard, never been taught. And it put me in the same place Cathy has talked about, being in a position where I often say and do things without realizing their impact. And I appreciate what you're saying about the testing, because how you ask the question
That's it.
matters.
It does.
But I also wanted to go back to Reverend Patterson's comment about going into a church where she was visiting and didn't feel welcome, and the hesitancy to come back. When I served a church in the upstate, I had a woman walk in and sit down and talk with me in the church sanctuary during the Sunday school hour. And the crushing moment was when I realized that she was asking me if she could stay because of the color of her skin and the color of my skin and what she saw around her. I later learned from looking at aerial photos that all the housing around this mill church had been torn down after the mill closed, which was a way of keeping the racial divide. And her coming into the church in itself was a huge step that I didn't recognize. But she had to stop and ask. can I stay?
Mm.
And I still hear those words occasionally. Can I stay? Sometimes I don't think I have realized what huge steps people take to run for office, to work with a system that is so broken that the testing isn't standard, or what it means for someone to walk into a church and have to ask if they're welcome. But I later learned to question, was it the attitudes of the people who were still there that kept the question going, not just the history of the church? So I appreciate your story of what it felt like to be on the side that probably prompted her question. What are some things we can do to recognize that, is one of my questions. You said you got lots of calls, and my question is, was it almost concerning that you had gotten that many calls about the second church?
Reverend Patterson, would you like to
What's the
respond?
second church? Thank you so much.
The second church being the one that you had called and asked about coming, and you got a whole bunch of phone calls back. Talk a little bit more about that experience and how it made you feel to have people respond in that way.
It was good to have the experience with the second church. One of the members that called later told me that the pastor was a white pastor, but his daughter was married to an African American. So they were trying to make me feel very comfortable. They wanted me to come. I didn't want to attend. I just wanted to go. They were having a speaker. I was much older, younger. I probably would have showed up anyway. So it was totally different. And I felt like they were walking in the love of God. One of the things that's said about the church is that Sunday morning is one of the most racist time in America. Today, I stood up before my church and I said that the Holy Spirit is poured out on all flesh, all people. We're not there yet. So, but the second church certainly, if somebody is coming and you feel like they're uncomfortable, even sitting with them, even a member just reaching out will certainly make somebody from another race who's visiting your church feel a lot more comfortable. There are lots of ways that you can walk in the love of God and show the love of God to somebody else.
Let me ask, are there any other questions to our panelists? We have not asked any questions of our county elected sheriff. And I think it's important that we do ask him some questions or make some observations.
I actually wanted to say something to Sheriff Purnell, if possible.
Please, Ann, go ahead.
Okay. And I'm gonna get to the question, but first, so I'm gonna pull from Gandhi. I gotta pull from Gandhi, the father of India, the man who successfully used nonviolent action to change the world. Before he developed his action of nonviolence, he studied history. He was very much affected by discrimination and prejudice that he experienced in India, and then when he went to study in England, and he studied war and he studied revolution, and he came up with his theory was that for violence to break out between two sides, the two sides get to a point where they feel like they are absolutely right and the other side is absolutely wrong. And when you get to that point, the other side is non-reconcilable. They're not worthy of being reconciled with. And I feel like that's where we are right now with the issue of the policing and the racial issue, and how do we back away from that place. I mean, I really do believe that people are really dug in on that, and there's a complete lack of awareness or humility to think that we don't know everything. Like, there's something to the fact that half of the people in this country are very passionate about their stance. So I want to learn where that passion is coming from. But I think, Sheriff Purnell, you're probably in a difficult place. And I'm curious what it's like for you, knowing that there's this kind of division, polarity, and, you know, knowing that there are lots and lots and lots of white people who don't believe the police have done anything wrong, or when they watch that on TV, they're like, well, that was justified. He had drugs in his system. The phone looked like a gun. He was resisting arrest. Is that going on in your mind a lot? And kind of how do you deal with that?
Yes, that crosses my mind every day. But we all need to be for real. If it wasn't for the videos, none of those officers would be charged. What it's going to take, it's going to take every officer that take the oath. You're going to have to stop the ones who are doing the wrongdoing. You're going to have to report wrong actions before it comes to you have to taking someone's life. Again, if it was not for the cameras, and I'm 100% law enforcement, but a report can be written any way you want it to be written. That's where our problem is coming in. We are having a lot of officers rigging the reports, putting it to their advantage to say, this is what happened. As you say, they reached over for a phone and you say you thought it was a gun. Well, we're gonna have to get better trained. You don't shoot until you actually see the gun and it's pointing in your direction. Now, some may say, I can't wait until that point. But it all depends on the tone of your voice, the tone of the individual voice. If you are frightened before you ever get to the car, you're going to be more anxious to pull your weapon and discharge it before you even have an opportunity to talk to the individual. To me, it's the way we carry ourselves.
Yes.
That's going to be the most important thing. In Dillon County, we're trying our very best to get to know our communities, all the communities. We're trying to get it where our white officers can feel freely to go into a black area. The black officers feel free to go into a white area. Until we bridge these gaps amongst each other, we're going to always have problems with this issue. Again, my department, we're going to be transparent. If something happens and it's wrong, we're going to share it with the public. We're not going to hold back, try to say this happened, that happened, whatever happened, that's the way it'll be. And again, until we can bridge the gap with the community and get everybody on one accord, and that's a lot of work to do. Now, this is not going to happen tomorrow because it didn't start yesterday. So it's going to take time. But I believe if we interact with our citizens, show the citizens that we're there for them and we're not against them, because a lot of them truly believe law enforcement are against them. That's my step here in Dillon County, to get it where we are interacting with our communities so that they know us and we know them, and to show them that we're there to help them. We're not there to harm them. I hope I answer your question, but I feel free if that's not enough, I go for it.
Thank you. I mean, we could go on and on. What would you tell the person who is dead set in thinking that in these situations, many of these situations, the police did exactly what they were supposed to do and they've done exactly nothing wrong?
Well, one thing I would say, a lot of the stops, listen to the commands. You're not going to win the battle out on the highway against law enforcement too much.
Yes.
Get the officer name, the badge number, and the department. Live to go and make a report the next day instead of trying to fight on the street.
Mhm.
I mean, in some incidents, yes, if you would have listened to the commands and did what was said, you may be living today. So it plays a role both ways. So I say to all the young men and ladies, listen to the commands, do as you said to do at that time. And if you feel that you hadn't done anything wrong, come to the department, come to the head of the department and explain your situation. Again, you're not going to win out there because, like you say, if you reach and you shot, then it's too late. And then we got this riot. So if you would just, everybody just take a deep breath and we can accomplish this together. But it's going to take both sides, not just the citizen as well as law enforcement to do this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me ask Chief Sheriff Purnell, how important is it to have a racially balanced department?
That it's very important that you do have a balanced department. I mean, it's simple. I mean, if you had all white officers, they going into a black neighborhood, an Afro-American neighborhood, you're gonna have problems. I mean, you're gonna have problems from the time they get there to the time they leave, vice versa. If we have an all Afro-American department and we're going into a white neighborhood, we're gonna have problems. That's why, you know, I try to match them up, you know, and have them to ride together, you know, get out and ride together, go in these neighborhoods together, introduce your counterpart to your people and he introduced you to his people. It shouldn't be like that, but hey, again, we in America, it's like that. And so ain't no need of us trying to sugarcoat it. We got problems. So what we really need to do is get out and be more involved in the community. Let the people see you. Let the people know what you stand for. You know, it's kind of complicated, but the more you work together, the better we're gonna be. And having a department that's halfway equal, it shows a major part in your role as a leader. You have to have a balance because again, when we go into these neighborhoods, some has already got their mind set when you get there. So you have to be prepared. And we have to listen to them. We just can't go in there because we got the gun and the badge. We have to listen to the people. You know, they know what's going on in the neighborhood. Just listen to them, hear them out, and then do what you need to do to get the job done. That you get to go home that night, they get to go home. That's the way I see it.
Thank you so very much. Are there any someone asked this question, why is it law officers seem to shoot at the person's head
Yes.
instead of aiming to stop, instead to kill? Would you speak to that, Sheriff?
Yes, I can say the training, it doesn't teach you to shoot to the head, shoot the chest area. That's the most part of the body. It teaches you that when you go through the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. I guess that is the kill the threat. I mean, it's the way it's been taught to you. You know, you kill the threat. If that individual has a gun, you shoot them in the arm, that gives them an opportunity to shoot you. Now, shooting in the head, no, I wasn't taught to shoot in the head. I was taught to shoot in the chest area, cabin. So when someone shoot in the head, they may be just random shooting. I don't know, but it is for you to eliminate the threat to you. You know, so you shoot someone, you immediately handcuff them. They have a firearm, you get it away from them. That's what I was taught, and that's what I believe in. I mean, again, firing your weapon should be your last resort in any situation. That should be the last thing you want to do is discharge your firearm towards the individual.
There's one other question, Sheriff, in the chat that asks, Sheriff, what are the most effective ways from your ways from your experience for the church to partner with our law enforcement brothers and sisters to create a bridge towards reconciliation between the community and those in law enforcement?
Well, I often say the church has the most powerful organization that we have. Again, I heard someone say on Sunday morning is probably one of the worstest times for racism, but it's also a time for the pastors, leaders in the community to come together. I mean, when we have these young kids out here doing things that they shouldn't be doing, a lot of churches are not getting involved. A lot of pastors are not doing their part as helping law enforcement by creating meetings. I mean, if we can just, on Saturday morning, anytime really, we can just come together and invite the youth in and talk to them. The pastor in my church, when the pastor says something, it pretty much goes over. And that's the way it is. If we can get our pastors on board, talking to the community, that would help law enforcement tremendously. Because you not only have law enforcement, you got your pastors, you got organizations, you got everybody trying to help bridge this gap. But again, when you just leave it up to law enforcement to do this and law enforcement to do that, it creates a problem. If we can all work together, we could solve a lot of these issues that we face today. It could take just an hour on Saturdays or an hour midweek, just coming together. If we have someone out there that's causing some problems, you know, we can reach out to our school system. Everybody got to work together in order for this to really and truly become true fights of what we can do here in the PD area and across this nation. It's going to take all of us working together to bridge this gap.
Sheriff, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, and I want to make a statement. I've tried to be very, very neutral here, but out of my own lived experience, I served for 4 years, appointed by the mayor of the city of Anderson, Indiana, to serve on the Board of Public Safety, and then subsequently by my peers elected to serve as the chairman of the board for 2 years. What I found out was that we hired police officers from what we called donut communities. These were persons that lived in homogeneous areas, all white perhaps, or all black or whatever, but mostly all white, who came to Anderson where Anderson was about 27% African-American. So this was, for many of them, the first time that they had any significant interaction with African-Americans their whole lives. What we found out was that there was something amiss because there was not what we called cultural competency. In other words, there are trigger words, there are languages used in certain ethnic communities that if you don't understand them, immediately you become suspicious. And when we realized that and we began to do cultural competency, that was the first thing. The second thing we did was we looked at our police hiring process. And we realized that it was slanted again against hiring minorities and women of all colors. And so we began to do some implicit and explicit bias, looking at the way we interviewed, looking at the questions that were asked, looking at who was on the interview team, all of those things. But the biggest thing we learned was that there were people in our community who wanted to be police officers, but they had already had a interface with the police department that had put them in a non-hireable status. These were good people. These were people who, many of them had served in the military at some point, come out, had one interaction with the police department, got a conviction, which then made them ineligible to be hired. Help me to understand what we can do to help young African-American and Latinas find ways to not get involved in the criminal justice system until they're involved as either a cadet or as a hire. What can the church do, black or white, to help make sure that our young people do not have such negative interactions with the police department that they become ineligible to be hired?
Well, first of all, what we can do, church as well as law enforcement. I have a young man, an Afro-American, where I'm facing this same situation. Oh, he has a criminal record, but it's been 20 some years ago. And in South Carolina, it just takes the signature of the sheriff who's willing to say, I'm willing to give this individual an opportunity, but also I have to get him passed through the South Carolina criminal justice. They will be the final decision. I can sign a letter and say, you know, I'm willing to take a chance on this individual. But at the end of the day, they may accept, they may not accept. But what we can do, a lot of them, just like him, it's been 20 years. We need to get their records expunged, cleared up, so that they don't have to face this. And that's simply going to the solicitor of the district that you're in and saying, hey, this individual, he has a criminal record. It's been 15, 20 years. He has not come in contact with the law since then. What can we do to clear his record? Now he's on the right track. He's on the right path. He wants to be a great citizen of our community. What can we do to help? So that's where the church can get involved. We can start programs such as that, calling them in and say, hey, I understand if you have a record, let's talk about it. Let's get the solicitor in. Let's get law enforcement in so that we can all go over this. If this is something that you want to do, and not only getting into law enforcement on any job, it's hurting each and every one of them when they go and apply for a job and they see that criminal record, they say, hey, we can't use you. And it shouldn't be like that when an individual have done something 20, 30 years ago. I mean, if they haven't been back in front of the law, then we all should be willing to give them a second chance. And that's something I believe in, a second chance. We all need a second chance in life. And if that's something that we can do together, that's something we can do together to bridge the gap. I mean, they resources out there, there's help out there. If you don't know, you don't know. So that's something that we can do in the PD, come up with a program where we can reach out to our solicitor and say, hey, this young man, this young lady, they're looking for a job, but they did this, they did that. We're trying to find a way that we can help them and get them back out into society where they can make a decent living for their family, take care of their family and themselves. That's one of the ways that we can do it. And you said Afro-Americans, we're looking for young ladies. We want females on our department. You know, some
Reggie, I want to speak to that because as we ask the question, what can the church do? We also find that the church is part of the history and part of the issue historically. And we use words in the life of the church like water, like justice. and some of these words like love and kindness and that sort of thing. And even within our own congregations throughout South Carolina, and that's what I could speak to as churches. And some churches in South Carolina may not have this issue, but my experience has been is that there is prejudice in all of our churches, that we in some way are fearful. And if I think that I'm not speaking out of school when I talk to the clergy and say to our clergy that it is, in my opinion, that it is extremely difficult and scary, whether you're Black or white, to talk about racial injustice in the life of your congregations, depending on where your place on the map is. But predominantly in South Carolina, if you are in a predominantly upper middle class church, it's going to be hard for you as a clergy person to preach that prophetic message without repercussions. It is the struggle that we all have in the life of the church is how can the church make a difference in community and not just be the building. And it's not just this issue of racism, but it's other injustices as well, is that we over time have gotten very comfortable in our structure and in our way of our language and what we will accept as an okay sermon or an okay message from the congregation, depending on the culture of that congregation, white or Black. It depends on the socioeconomic. And I do think that as we're answering questions, that one of the answers that I would have to all the questions, that while I'm not in the weeds of the education system or the law enforcement, I think I am in the weeds of the church. And that is that this is a systemic issue that historically, I hope I've shown that it's historically embedded in the fabric of all of us. And there is blindness. It's not color blindness, it's just pure T blindness. Color blindness is a myth. I think we see color just fine. I think we're just blind. But what it's going to really take is honest conversation.
There you go.
Yes.
I think it's going to take being able to say, as a white female, Cathy Joens, I can only speak for myself, is there are things that I don't know and don't understand. There are things that I want to know, and there are things that I must, in my own life, in my own actions, have to repent of, just like any other sin. And I think this is one of them as a part of that. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is that we're going to be offering, you're as a Marion District are going to be offering small groups with the opportunity of being able to be in conversation with one another. And so the prayer is that this is not an all Black group or an all white group because the conversation's easier. We actually want the conversation to be hard, patient, kind, and generous, and vulnerable. And we're using Who Lynched Willie Earl, Will Williams' book, Who Lynched Willie Earl, about a pastor who was absolutely dismayed in the town of Pickens as in 1947. I know ministers who knew this pastor, who was dismayed and discouraged and heartbroken over the lynching of Willie Earl and the injustice of it. And this is what he did. He preached in a time when he probably could. But in the book, you will find that there were other things he did not do in the name of justice. And so as we've listened to these questions, as we've listened to one another, I just really can't help but think that this is so systemic, that the place we start in the church as leaders in the life of the church, and I claim myself as one of those, that we've got to be in more conversation with one another. And we've got to understand the white man right now, the white 50, 60-year-old male who feels like they're getting a sledgehammer placed across their head or a baseball bat. And who either A, doesn't understand, or B, doesn't feel that way about other races. They feel like they've been lumped into a corner. We have to understand that it is fearful for any Black person to walk into a white church most of the time. And we have to be mindful that of what Sheriff Purnell has shared today and what Cynthia has shared about standardized tests. We have to be mindful that we all have a story to tell. And as we share one another's story and see the humanity in one another, my experience has been, it makes me want to stand with Deborah Patterson in a church, to stand with Cynthia Brown at a school board meeting. It makes me want to hug Amari Hooker and Reggie Lee in the middle of a restaurant, Reggie, when it's all white people in the Low Country watching us hug each other. It makes me want to do those things. As we can share and understand that we are all coming from a place, and many of us don't know South Carolina history, even though we've been raised here. I think it's important to know that. And so I hope that that you will be a part of a small group that will have these discussions, and that you will come being willing to share what you don't know as much as what you know, so that we can learn, or that you can learn. I won't be in those small groups. I'd love to be, but so that you can learn what you do know. Or what you can learn from one another. So Reggie, I don't know. I know that we've got so much time today, so I wanted to go ahead and jump into that arena.
Yeah,
Reggie.
I'm gonna ask Amari if you can go ahead and put up the screen of the identified leaders, times, and ways that we're going to meet together. Okay, brothers and sisters, coming onto the screen are the group leaders on the left side: Sandra Odom, Betty Swinton, Judith Knox, Mary Teasley, Kurt McPherson, Emily Kirby, and Wilma Lambry. Becky Green and Cynthia Williams from the Florence District will be teaching together. The times that they will be teaching will be on Sunday. They're each different. You see the times. You see how they're going to teach by Zoom or in person or some hybrid scenario. And so what we're asking you to do, if you want to have continued conversation, the Reverend Amari Hooker, who is the absolute guru at what we're doing here today technologically, will be sending out a doodle poll to you between now and no later than Tuesday, for you to prayerfully consider joining one of these groups. You'll just simply select the one that you are interested in joining. It will populate back, and then your information will be turned over to that leader to be in touch with you so that this conversation might continue. Here is what we know. Whatever we fail to discuss will continue to haunt us. And so Bishop Will Willimon, a United Methodist bishop, one from South Carolina who understands the contextual nature of the Palmetto State, has done some significant research and exegetical work in looking at what happened in the lynching of Willie Earl. And I think by the time you go through the 6 chapters, and the plan is that you will begin sometime after the 15th of July, give everybody a chance to move, who's moving, get settled wherever you're going. And then your leader will reach out and pick a time or, the actual day of your first meeting. You already know the days, but I'm talking about the actual date of your first meeting after the 15th of July. Then you will get started and meet bi-weekly unless the group decides to meet weekly, which is totally up to you. But there are only 6 chapters, so there's only a need for 6 sessions. What we hope is that when these groups have finished their work, that a similar Zoom meeting to this will be handled for debriefing and for sharing about what your group collectively learned that can help to inform the wisdom of the body. So that is what we hope to do. Again, those things are there for you. You'll get the doodle poll to know when and where you might be able to join one of these groups. We've got some very able and capable leaders. And so we're extremely significantly grateful for them giving of their time. They will be trained by the Reverend Cathy Joens on how to present this information. There will be standard questions that will be asked of each of the groups so that when you come back together, everybody has grappled with the same questions and the same issues, and it should make for a rich conversation. Amari, if you'll give me a chance to share my screen just for a moment, I will close with what I think will help to inform our conversation. There we are. Can you all see that? Can you all see what I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
very good. Excellent, excellent. Okay, we're in response 1 tonight. It's been a district, clergy, and laity. And Cathy, I think that needs to be changed because this district has shown that clergy and laity can come together for these conversations. So that's response 1. Response 2 is what we're offering you tonight, the small group conversations around the book Who Lynched Willie Earl by Bishop Will Willimon. Then response 3, and there's a huge one for pastors. No one can tell you who can preach from your pulpit but you. There's not a committee in the church, particularly if you're inviting another United Methodist. Now, you know our polity. If they're non-United Methodists, if they're not from the Wesleyan family, you need to talk with your superintendent before you invite them to preach. But if they are from the Wesleyan family, AME, AME Zion, CME, UMIP, any of those, you are welcome to invite. But particularly your own brothers and sisters from our own Zion, the way that we grow, the way that we model for our folk is by opening our pulpits to people of all races, ages, creeds, and particularly gender. So you should think about that as pastors and even as lay persons to say to your pastor, let's get somebody in here who you trust, who has good Wesleyan theology to preach from this pulpit. Our pulpits will remain closed until we see someone rightfully divide the word of truth in our pulpits that are either racially diverse or gender diverse. Response number 4, a season of jubilee. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. A time of holy forgiveness and rest. And response number 5, healing through preaching. Again, pastors, you have to decide whether you're going to be prophets, for profit or profits that will allow the justice of God to roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. And then response number 6 is accountable honesty in society. And that's what we're talking about with Sheriff Purnell. How can your churches become shalom zones where you're inviting people in who need to interface with the police department to get their criminal records cleaned up so that they can be productive citizens and not live a life under the radar and under scrutiny and living below their created divinity that God has created each of us in his image and likeness. Brothers and sisters, we have significant work to do in the life of this great annual conference. And today is just one step on the journey. I want to take this time to thank my colleague, the Reverend Cathy Joens, for her significant leadership. I want to thank your superintendent who is always willing to press the envelope and to do some things that perhaps have not yet been done quite this way before. At this time, I will unshare my screen and turn this back in to the very capable hands. Mari, can you take it back and allow the superintendent to close us out? So that is.
Reverend Lee, thank you very much. I want to say thank you to Reggie and to Cathy, who have done such a great job of leading us today. And I want to thank our guest speakers who've come to share with us out of their own experience, Sheriff Purnell and Reverend Brown and Reverend Patterson. I learn more and more the power of story, to simply hear each other's stories so that we have something of a window into the lives of the people that we share this earth with. So I appreciate your willingness to be a part of this, and to our panelists, our 4 panelists who were willing to follow up and to ask questions or make comments and help us explore a little further the stories that we've heard. And to everybody who is, well, first of all, and to Reverend Hooker, who is really gifted at this stuff and has helped us. This is not his first time doing this for the Marion District, and we are very grateful to him.
Amen. Amen.
He is very gifted in this and has helped. This is stuff that we've tried to do out of the district office in the past, and we are delighted that we are not doing it. He is doing a terrific job. And to all of you who have joined today, I'm glad that we've had some people who've been able to join from other districts, and to both the clergy and the laity who've given of your time. This is going to wind up being about 2.5 hours on a Sunday afternoon. But the fact of the matter is that we've sort of cut it short. When we did it for the annual conference, I believe there was an entire day event. And you can see from the way it's gone today why this really is an introduction, is what it is, and an invitation to people to be engaged in this even further as the days go by. I thank everyone for your time, and let's close with a prayer, and we will then be free for that long drive from our computer to the refrigerator or wherever it is we're going next. But let's pray. Gracious God, you are the God of all of us. You have created all people in your image. And your Son, when he was walking among us, prayed that we might all be one. So we echo that prayer and ask that you would grant to us the courage, the patience, the grace to pursue that day, Lord, when our divisions will be few and our unity in you might be strong. We thank you for all those who have been on this call and others who have provided resources that we have used in this call to provide leadership and guidance. We pray that you would open our hearts to one another. We pray that you would open our hearts most of all to you, that we might love you so much that we would learn to love each other. Be with us this evening, we pray. Grant us rest, raise us up tomorrow to serve you again. We pray it in the name of your Son who lived and died and rose again so that we might know what true life is. Your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, folks.
Amen.
Good to have you with us. Good night.
Good night.
Please check your doodle poll, your email for the doodle poll, so that you can join if you decide to one of these great groups that will be studying the book, Who Lynched Willie Earl. Blessings to everyone. And again, Superintendent, thank you for the privilege to serve on this district the last 5 years. I wish you all Godspeed.
Thank you, Reggie. We'll be following you in your new assignment. Wish you well.
Pray
You'll
for
do
me.
good.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Doc.
You don't know which way to turn. God is concerned and is working it out for you.